I need to tell you something about my husband before I tell you what he's been doing. Because without understanding who Micah Murray is, the rest of this story won't hit the way it should. Micah is the kind of man who remembers things. Not big things, not anniversaries and birthdays, though he gets those right too, but the small things. The things people say once, casually, without any expectation of being heard. The things that slip out between the grocery list and the work call and the 7 other conversations happening simultaneously in the loud, ongoing negotiation of a shared life. He catches them, quietly, files them somewhere inside himself, and does nothing about it until the exact right moment, when he produces the remembered thing like a card from a deck you didn't know he was holding, and you realize with a start that he has been paying attention to you the whole time, without announcement, without credit, just because that is who he is. I knew this about him when I married him. I loved him for it specifically. And then we had Hannah, and the world compressed into feeding schedules and pediatric appointments and the specific madness of 2 people trying to function on 4 hours of broken sleep. And somewhere inside that beautiful chaos, I stopped noticing that he was still doing it. Still watching. Still listening. Still filing things away. I stopped noticing, and then one night I noticed everything all at once, and I have not been the same since. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Hannah was born on a Tuesday in March, which meant that by October, Portland was doing what Portland does in October, settling into a steady gray rain that turns the whole city soft and amber and makes you want to be inside with something warm. She was 7 months old, and she was perfect, and she was absolutely destroying us in the most wonderful possible way. I taught history at Roosevelt High for 11 years before Hannah arrived. I was good at it. I was organized, patient, capable of holding 30 teenagers' attention for 50 minutes at a stretch, which is genuinely harder than it sounds. I had systems. I had routines. I had a grade book that was never more than 2 days behind. Motherhood arrived and dismantled every system I had ever built with the cheerful efficiency of a demolition crew that doesn't speak your language and isn't taking questions. I was on maternity leave, which meant I was home all day with a 7-month-old who had not yet received the memo about consolidated naps or predictable bedtimes. And by 7 o'clock every evening when Micah came through the door from work, I had usually been awake for 13 hours and had consumed approximately 1 full meal in installments. Micah would walk in, read my face in about 4 seconds, and silently take Hannah so I could eat something with both hands. He never said anything about it. He never made me feel like a report card. He just took her and heated up whatever I'd managed to assemble in the slow cooker and sat across from me while I ate and asked about my day with the genuine curiosity of someone who actually wants to know. I need you to understand how much that meant. I need you to understand what it costs a person to show up like that every single evening after their own full day of work, without complaint, without scorecard, simply because the person they love needs them to. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing, actually. That is what love looks like when nobody's watching. So when Micah sat me down on a Wednesday evening in mid-October with the specific expression he uses when he's about to say something he's been rehearsing, my first instinct was not suspicion. It was attention. I set down my tea and I looked at him and I waited. "I've been thinking," he said, "and I want to ask you something, or propose something, I guess." "Okay," I said. He took a small breath. "I'd like to have an hour to myself in the evenings, after Hannah goes down, just an hour every night. I'd stay in the house, I'm not going anywhere, but I'd need it to be uninterrupted unless something's actually wrong. You can text me, obviously, but otherwise I just need that time." I looked at him. He looked back at me with the careful expression of a man who is very aware that this request could land badly and is hoping it doesn't. And here is what I want to say about that moment, because I think it matters. My first feeling was not logic. It was a small, irrational, sleep-deprived pang of something that I am not proud of but will name accurately, because accuracy is the only thing I've ever been good at. It was fear. Not fear of anything specific, just the ambient fear that lives in the corners of new parenthood, the worry that the exhaustion is too much, that the romance has evaporated, that the person you love most is beginning to find the current version of your life too heavy and is looking for somewhere lighter to stand. I felt that for about 90 seconds. Then I looked at Micah, at his face, which I have been reading for 9 years and which has never once lied to me, and I understood that what I was seeing was not distance. It was a man who needed something and was asking for it honestly, which is what healthy people do, and which I should have found completely unremarkable except that my brain was operating on insufficient sleep and too much anxiety and had briefly forgotten how to be reasonable. "Of course," I said, "you don't have to ask Micah." He visibly relaxed, reached across and squeezed my hand once. "Thank you," he said, and meant it in the simple, direct way he means most things. That night, after I settled Hannah and came back downstairs, Micah kissed me on the forehead and disappeared down the hall toward the small room we use as a combination guest room and storage space. I sat on the couch. The rain moved against the windows. I turned on something to watch and mostly looked at my phone and tried not to feel the peculiar loneliness of a quiet house. The next night was the same, and the night after that. Like clockwork, after Hannah went down, Micah would reappear from wherever he'd been, kiss me, and say goodnight before heading to the back room. Exactly 1 hour later, he would emerge, pour himself a glass of water, and come find me on the couch looking entirely normal. Normal, but also, and I want to be precise here, slightly pleased with himself. In the specific, contained way of a person who is successfully keeping a secret and finding it more difficult than they anticipated. I know my husband. I know the particular set of his shoulders when he is carrying something. I know the way he gets quiet in a different quality than his regular quiet. I noticed all of it and said nothing, because I also know that Micah Murray has never in 9 years kept a secret that wasn't attached to something kind, and so I filed the observation away and waited. The discovery, when it came, was an accident. 13 days into the routine, on a Friday night, I was in the kitchen making tea when I knocked my phone off the counter and it skidded under the refrigerator. I got down on the floor to retrieve it and found, along with the phone, a substantial collection of dust and one of Hannah's hair ties, a receipt, folded small, from a woodworking supply store on Burnside that I drove past every week and had never once entered. I sat on the kitchen floor and looked at it. Micah had been to a woodworking supply store. Micah, who once described his relationship with power tools as respectful mutual avoidance. Micah, whose entire professional life involved designing things for other people to build while he stood at a drafting table and made them look beautiful on paper. I thought about the receipt for a long time. Then I put it in my cardigan pocket and went back to my tea. 2 nights later, I found the second clue, and this one was harder to explain away as coincidence. I was putting a load of laundry into the dryer, Hannah's things, the small, soft items that accumulated faster than physics should allow, and a pair of Micah's jeans came out of the wash with the pockets still full. This happened constantly. Micah's relationship with empty pockets was theoretical at best. I turned them out over the laundry room sink and found the usual collection. 2 guitar picks he hadn't played in months, a gas station receipt, 47 cents, and a folded piece of paper that turned out to be a printed page from a website. I unfolded it carefully. It was a beginner's guide to woodworking joinery. Specifically, the section on making a small wooden keepsake box. It had been printed from a site called build-it-yourself.com, and the margins had Micah's handwriting in them, measurements, a question mark next to a step that apparently confused him, and at the top, in his careful architect's script, a single word that he'd underlined twice. Natalia. I stood in the laundry room for a long moment with the paper in my hands. Then something else happened, which is the part that reordered everything. I went to find my phone to text Deborah, because Deborah was the person I told things to, in the way you need one person to tell things to. And I opened it to find 3 missed calls from Micah's brother, Nate, which was unusual enough that I called him back immediately. Nate answered on the first ring with the energy of a man who has been waiting. "Hey, did Micah tell you about the pause? A very specific pause, the kind that happens when a person realizes mid-sentence that they are about to say the wrong thing. About the thing with the. Nate, I said. Never mind, Nate said immediately. Nate. It's nothing. Forget I called. How's the baby? I sat down. Nate, what thing? A very long silence. I'm not. He would genuinely kill me, Natalia. Like, this is a thing he specifically. Is everyone safe? I asked, because this was the only question that actually mattered. Yes, God, yes, everyone's completely fine. It's a good thing. A really good thing. I should not have called. This was a mistake. Please don't tell him I called. I won't tell him you called, I said. Thank you, Nate said. With the relief of a man who has narrowly avoided a disaster he created entirely himself. But Nate, yeah, whatever it is, tell him I'm going to love it. A pause, then Nate laughed, the big genuine laugh he reserves for things that actually earn it. Yeah, he said softly, you are. I hung up and sat with everything I had just assembled. The woodworking supply receipt, the printed instructions with my name in the margin, Nate's almost slip, and 63 days of a husband who emerged from his one private hour each evening looking quietly, privately satisfied. He was building me something. I didn't know what yet, but I knew that. I knew it the way you know things about people you have loved carefully for a long time, the way the evidence of someone's character accumulates over years, until their actions become completely legible even before they're finished. Here is what I knew about Micah and wood. Nothing. He knew nothing about woodworking. His hands were a landscape architect's hands. He could sketch anything, grade a slope with his eye, read the structure of a garden in 30 seconds, but he had never built a physical object in his life. Whatever he was making, he was teaching himself to make it, in 1-hour increments, every night, in the back room of our house while I sat on the couch and thought he was decompressing. He was not decompressing. He was working. For me. On his own time, after his own full day, inside his 1 hour of quiet, he was learning something new entirely because he wanted to give me something made by his own hands. I went back to the couch. I pulled a blanket around my shoulders. I turned the television on without seeing it. 3 weeks later, I was nursing Hannah at midnight. One of those unexpected middle-of-the-night sessions that arrive without warning and require you to sit in the rocking chair in the dim nursery and simply be awake with your child while the rest of the house sleeps, when I heard it. From the back room, very faint, the careful measured sound of sandpaper on wood. He was working late, past his hour. Something was in a finishing stage, I understood, and he was pushing past his usual limit to get there. I sat in the rocking chair with Hannah warm and heavy against my chest, and listened to my husband sand, something smooth in the room down the hall. And I felt a feeling I don't have a precise word for, something between gratitude and tenderness, and the specific ache of loving someone so much that even the sound of them working in the next room is almost too much to hold. Hannah fell asleep. I stayed in the chair longer than I needed to. The sanding stopped. I heard the back room door open softly. A pause, he was checking whether Hannah's light was on, and then quiet footsteps past the nursery door, deliberate and careful so as not to wake her. He didn't know I was in there. He didn't know I was awake. I sat in the dark with my sleeping daughter and listened to my husband tiptoe past us on his way to bed, carrying whatever secret he was carrying, and I thought, this is the whole thing right here. This is what it is. This exhausting, imperfect, beautiful, completely ordinary miracle of a life we are building together. I didn't sleep for another hour, not from worry, just from feeling too much to put down. Now here is the part of the story that I didn't see coming, and I am a person who notices things. The following Saturday, while Micah took Hannah to his mother's for the afternoon so I could have 3 uninterrupted hours, a gift he had arranged without telling me, which should have been my first clue that something was in motion, I went to the back room. I want to be clear, I had not planned this. I had walked down the hall to get a sweater from the linen closet, and the back room door was slightly open, which it never was, and I told myself I was only going to look. I looked. The room had been quietly transformed. The folding table we used to wrap Christmas presents was set up along the far wall, covered with a drop cloth. Tools I didn't recognize were arranged with the particular neatness of someone who has learned to respect their equipment because they've already made the mistake of not respecting it. Wood shavings on the floor. The smell of something clean and fresh. Pine, I thought, or cedar. On the table, under the drop cloth, was a shape. I stood in the doorway for a long time. I did not touch the drop cloth. I am a person who respects endings, who believes the last page of a book deserves to be read in the right order, and I understood with complete clarity that whatever was under that cloth was not mine to see until Micah was ready to show me. I backed out of the room, pulled the door to its original position, went and got my sweater and sat in the kitchen and drank my tea and thought about a man who had stood at a drafting table for 15 years designing beautiful things, and then one day decided quietly that he was going to make something beautiful with his hands instead. For no audience, with no guarantee of success, simply because the person he loved had said, offhand in the middle of an ordinary evening, that she wanted something. He had heard it, he had remembered it, he had done something about it. Micah came home that evening with Hannah asleep in the car seat and flour on his shirt from a baking project at his mother's house, which he described in great detail while unloading the diaper bag, and I stood in the kitchen doorway watching him and feeling the way you feel at the end of something you know is almost finished, not sad, just present, aware, grateful in advance. That night after Hannah went down, he did not disappear to the back room. He stood in the living room with his hands in his pockets looking at me with that expression, the rehearsed one, the one I recognized from the night he asked for his hour, except that this time underneath the nerves was something else. Something that looked like the satisfaction of a person who has finished something and is about to hand it over. "I have something for you," he said. "Okay," I said, carefully, holding my face in the neutral, interested expression of a woman who is hearing this for the first time. He went down the hall. I heard the back room door open. A minute passed. He came back carrying something wrapped in the brown craft paper we kept in the closet, tied with twine, roughly the size of a shoebox but heavier, with the slight irregular shape of something handmade. He set it on the coffee table in front of me and sat down across from it, watching my face. I looked at him first. Before I touched it, I looked at my husband, at the way he was sitting slightly forward, hands clasped, trying to look relaxed and completely failing. And I thought about 47 nights of One Private Hour, and receipts in jacket pockets, and my name written in the margin of a beginner's guide, and sandpaper sounds at midnight, and Nate's too long pause on the phone, and all of it, assembling itself into this moment. I undid the twine carefully, unfolded the craft paper. Inside was a wooden keepsake box. Small and clean-lined, made from cedar with a fitted lid that lifted off smoothly, sanded to a finish that caught the lamplight. On the lid, he had carved something. Shallow letters, careful and slightly uneven in the specific way of a person who taught themselves. L+N+M Hannah. Natalia. Micah. Our three initials arranged in a small cluster, surrounded by the outline of leaves. Because he was a landscape architect, because of course he would put leaves, because he cannot help putting growing things into the things he makes. Inside the box, tucked in tissue paper, was a small folded note. I unfolded it. I don't know if this is good. I know it took longer than it should have and Nate almost told you twice, which I will deal with separately. But I wanted to make something, not design it, not hand it off. Actually make it with my hands start to finish, so that when Hannah is older and she asks about the beginning, about when she was small and the three of us were just figuring out how to be us, there's something solid she can hold, something her dad made, for the family we're building. I love you both more than I know how to say, so I made a box instead. I read it twice, then I set it down on the coffee table and looked at Micah. He was watching me with the expression of a person braced for a verdict, and I realized he genuinely could not read my face in this moment, which almost never happened, and which meant he had been more nervous about this than he'd let on. "Nate almost told me twice," I said. He closed his eyes briefly. "I know." He called the house. "I know, he told me, I'm dealing with it." "Micah." He opened his eyes. "I heard you sanding at midnight 3 weeks ago," I said. I was in the nursery with Hannah and I heard you working late and I sat there in the dark and listened and I didn't say anything because I stopped, took a breath, because some things deserve to finish the way they were meant to finish. He looked at me. This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever made me, I said. Not because it's perfect, because you made it. Because you spent every single one of those hours on this, and you never once mentioned it or asked for credit or made it into something you were doing for me instead of just doing it. He was quiet for a moment. The joinery on the hinge is a little uneven, he said. Micah. I know. He reached across and took my hand. I just wanted you to have something real. I do, I said. I have everything real. We sat on the couch, while the rain moved against the windows, and Hannah slept down the hall making the small sound she made, and the cedar box sat on the coffee table between us, catching the lamplight on its carved leaves, and I thought about all the things that don't get said in the loud, busy middle of a life. All the noticed things, the filed-away things, the quietly accumulated evidence of one person's attention to another. And how sometimes all of it comes back to you at once in the form of a handmade box with uneven joinery, and your name in the margin of a beginner's guide. That night, I put the note inside the box and closed the lid and set it on the shelf in Hannah's room, where it has been ever since. She will grow up seeing it there. She will ask about it eventually, and I will tell her that her father made it the winter she was 7 months old, during 1 hour every night that he said was for himself and turned out to be entirely for us. And she will understand, the way I hope she grows up understanding, that love is almost never the grand gesture. It is the receipt in the jacket pocket. It is the name in the margin. It is the sound of sandpaper at midnight when everyone else is asleep. It is the longest hour, spent on someone else, quietly, without keeping score. That is the whole story. That is all of it. I would not trade a single minute.